I'm Andy Lyons, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to DroneCamp 2022. We have a great program in store. I know, right? All right. So it's my pleasure to give a few welcome remarks this morning on behalf of myself and our director, Maggie Kelly, who's joining us remotely through Zoom. She was going to be here, but a COVID issue came up, so she's joining us remotely. We will hear her speak on Wednesday. But let me just jump right into it and share my enthusiasm. I think it's very, we can guarantee that this is going to be a fun week. The technology for working with drones for mapping and research is just phenomenal. If you haven't played with this a lot, I think you're really going to enjoy it. I'm a data nerd, so I like the data side of it, but what these machines can do, it's absolutely stunning. It's a new novel kind of data. The spatial and temporal resolution allows us to ask new kinds of questions, new kinds of precision. It's really, really exciting technology. And this is just like you'll see a lot of slides like this showing what you can do with the pictures that we're going to take. Right? But DroneCamp is, although it's technology focused, it's really not about the drones. It's about us, the people. You folks and us. If it wasn't for the people that come together, this would not even be a thing, right? So this is a snapshot of some of the photos from previous drone camps. We'll have a lot more pictures this week. But this is really, it's really about this community that we've brought together over the past 6 years. This is hard to believe, but this is our 6th drone camp. So I want to start by highlighting some of the organizations and some of the people who have come to make this event possible. So these are kind of like the parent organizations of the main organizers. And so thanks to all of them, this is our 6th year. One thing I will highlight here, as you might notice, is that 4 out of the 5 organizations that have given birth to this program are public universities, institutes of higher education. And this is exactly what public higher education is supposed to do. Our mission is to get research and training to the people. So thank you for being part of this. And this is why we like our work. This is why we wake up every day. So if you're a taxpayer or a voter, thank you, because you make this possible, right? This is your tax dollars at work. We have some other organizations that are supporting us this year. A big shout out to the AI Institute for Food Systems. That's a program up at Davis, and we have several high school teachers who are attending DroneCamp this week, and they're learning to work with drones, and then we'll take it back to their schools. UC Merced, Aaron Hester's lab is also supporting some of their students to come here. We're very appreciative of that. Shout out to UCANR-IGIS. We're going to be there tonight. So that's a facility close by, administered by UC Santa Cruz, I believe, and they're also have supported our program through their event space. And lots and lots of people behind the scenes. And I want to pause and start with this big list of people. Some of these are also front end, but many of these people are handling the accounts and MOUs and the facilities. You can only imagine how many moving parts there are to a program like this. Just look at all this equipment that had to get here today. So big thanks to all of the back-end people from the different organizations. It takes a lot to get a program like this off the ground. All right. And connecting all the dots are our planning committee. We've been meeting probably since October last year. So many, many months to plan this all out. I probably missed some people, but these are some of the core members of the planning committee who have come together and tried to make this all possible, right? So a big shout out to them. And of course, this wouldn't happen without you people, the participants. So we have 73 people here who will be here this week in person, another 62 online. I think this is actually going up a little bit, but roughly 135 altogether. So we're extremely pleased with that. The last 2 years we've been virtual, right? So this is really, really nice to be back in person. This is where people are coming from, mostly in the US, as we kind of expect. You can look at those, I think the purple dots are in-person participants, right? So we have, anyone from Florida here? I see a There we go. So a few folks from Florida. I see some other East Coast folks. We have some people zooming in from South Africa and Morocco, Algeria, Spain, Canada. So it's really great to have a broad representation, and everybody is welcome here. We asked you what your position, what your titles are, and this is what we found. Let me move this. Getting some blockage on screen. So a lot of academics, a lot of researchers and students and people who work in universities. But if you look at some of these other things, you know, land, wildlife, so it's a real domain diversity. And one of the things that's fun to work with drones and to come together in groups like this is to learn what are the applications for this cool technology in all kinds of fields, right? It's a new kind of data, and we're still learning where it has the best value. Many people are starting out as from at least for flying relatively as a beginner. So between the absolute beginners and the novices, that's, you know, more than 3/4 of you. That's exactly, you're in the right place. We're not presuming any experience or knowledge flying drones or working with the data. This camp attempts to cover everything. It's kind of one of the few programs that really does cover everything from planning to the regulations to the safety to the flying all the way to the data processing. So it's a lot to cover in 1 week. So you won't come out as masters, but you'll see a lot. So we're really glad, and tomorrow will be fun because we'll actually be out there. And if you haven't flown a drone before, you will have by this time tomorrow, you'll be out there. We will have a simulator tonight at the reception too, if you want to practice on a simulator before you go out there. Likewise, with working with the data, right? So this is the end of the pipeline, and many people are just getting started with that. So you're in the right place, and you'll get a good overview of all the pieces of the workflow. A little bit about the history of DroneCamp. This is our 6th year. I won't go into all the details, but every year it has gotten bigger. Since 2019, we've been here at CSU Monterey Bay. Super thrilled to be here. This is a phenomenal new campus. We're wonderful building here. We were virtual for the last couple of years, all on Zoom, but it's great to be back. This is our first attempt to do hybrid programming, so we'll see how that works. We gave out several scholarships this year, 30 scholarships, almost $7,000. So we attempt to make this accessible to everybody. We know it's a lot of cost and time to get here for a week, but we continue to do that. And our vision of what we are trying to achieve here, it's really to build, not just to train people, but to build a community, a big tent, so to speak. So what brings everybody here together is our enthusiasm and admiration and love for this technology that we're all interested in. Whatever you're coming from or why you're here, that's kind of the common thread. To have a good, safe learning environment, we need a safe space this week. So please be patient with yourself. This is a steep learning curve. So if you're feeling like you're not getting everything, that's pretty normal, right? So get what you can. Please be respectful to others. We're going to be with each other for the next 5 days. This is a little bit of a stressful time for everyone in our society. It just feels like every week there's big foundation shaking news coming out that has a lot of people on edge. A lot of us are feeling anxiety, whether it's, the pandemic is still with us. We had some big political news last week. There's fires, climate change. It feels like walking on a waterbed sometimes because you're not quite sure what's coming up next. So everybody's feeling something is affected. So please be supportive and respectful of each other, as well as with your instructors. We're doing our best, but we will hit some bumps probably. So we'll adapt quickly, but if we all work together, we'll get through this and have a great week. We do want to hear from you guys too. So please, we will have there's a Google Doc that everybody with the link can edit. So we will be using that throughout the week. If you have a resource that you want to share, you can throw it up there. We'll email you the link to that Google Doc later today. You can also get it through the DroneCamp website, which some people are having difficulty accessing today. So we'll get that fixed if it's not working right away. You will also get at the end of every day an email with an evaluation that you can fill out on your form. It's a Google form, and we really value your feedback. We're trying to make this better and responsive to your needs. All right, so please do that. We also want to see any photos or tweets or Instagram or Facebook, anything like that. Please use this hashtag. Yeah, thank you for the, yeah, there's a typo there. Yeah, hashtag DroneCamp 2022. That will be your hashtag. Yeah, and then we'll follow you on the various social media platforms. COVID protocols. Thank you everybody for being patient with us. One of the reasons we've got equipment on the first row is so that speakers don't have to spray people. The big rule is you wear your mask, please, at all times when you're indoors. But even when you're outdoors or out in the atriums, don't get right in people's faces. Try to maintain a bit of a distance. They've got the big round tables out there if you want to eat. If you are nervous about being exposed, we all get it, right? Everyone gets it. Just back yourself up or ask someone to back up, and we'll all be patient with that, including instructors, right? Because some of us are a little touchy-feely and we like to get close. But we'll all be reasonable. If you do feel sick this week, just stay home so you don't expose other people. We do have test kits. Please take a test kit. We don't want a spreader event, but if somebody gets sick, we want to know about it so that everybody else can take precautions. If you need medical care, just let us know. All right. So thank you for being part of our community. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Justin Cummings.
All right, thanks, Andy. I hope can you all hear me pretty well? Okay, great. Let's see. All right, so just to go over a few things. If you're here, as Andy mentioned, this is the first time we're doing this as a hybrid. So for folks who are here in person, just remember to check the schedule for the meeting locations. You can also find that agenda on the website. As Andy mentioned just before, COVID-19 protocols, it seems like everybody's wearing their masks indoors, but if you're not feeling okay, make sure to take a test because we want to try to keep everybody as safe as possible. Almost all of the sessions that are being offered in person will be recorded online as well, with the exception of the hands-on activities and some of the group breakout and social sessions. So for those people who are joining us virtually, you're pretty much going to be getting everything that the in-person folks are receiving as well. For those people who are participating online, we're using the webinars and the meetings. And so if you have questions for the instructors, please put those into the Q&A window. And then if you want to chat and kind of converse with other folks, you want to leave some comments, you can use the chat box for that. As I mentioned before, these sessions are being recorded and we're going to have them online. So after DroneCamp, if there's something you want to go back to and see again, they'll all be recorded and you all will have access to the links for those recordings. And as Andy mentioned, there likely will be some technological bumps along the way. And once again, we just ask for everyone's patience as we try to make it through these. So other reminders, again, the program is online, dronecampca.org/2022 agenda. And if there's any updates, you'll want to just check that on the different days. In addition to that, there's a technical support session that's I think around 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. every day, between actually Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And so especially for those people who are participating virtually, in terms of the data management sessions that we're going to have, you want to make sure you have all the data downloaded and the programs uploaded to your computers. And if there's any problems that you have, you want to log into the tech support between 1 to 2, and they can answer any questions that you have. And if folks here in the room as well, if you have questions, you can also go on that tech support. But most of the data and the software we're going to be using is already going to be on the computers we'll be using on those days when we're doing the data analysis. And so why a course on drone mapping? As many of us are seeing, the use and application of drones is becoming much more accessible to people for a variety of different uses. Everything from construction management and building surveys to agriculture, land mapping. This technology is becoming much more accessible, and as a result, there's the need for people who have the skills to not only fly the drones, but analyze the data. And so we're hoping that this week we will be able to go from introducing you to the different platforms and why certain platforms can be used for certain applications versus others, getting you all your hands on some of the drones so you can fly them, and then also the data analysis. And so we're hoping to convey the breadth of skills and knowledge for drone mapping, help accelerate the learning curve for people who are interested in mapping. As I mentioned, getting the hands-on experience. And our hope is that we can also, through this week that we're here, help you all reduce errors and accidents. And most importantly, we want everyone to kind of build networks and have fun, right? We've been stuck in virtual world for a couple years now, and now that we're able to be back in person, we want to make sure that we're having fun and getting the most out of our time together. So just to talk a little bit about the schedule today, well, there's going to be a welcome and overview of each day. Today, we're really going to focus on the introduction to the hardware and the sensors, safety, field planning, and equipment prep, and then mission planning. On Tuesday, tomorrow, we're going to have a lot of opportunities for people to fly. So we'll have advanced flight practice in the morning, and then we'll switch the groups and have beginner flight practice in the afternoon. But we're also going to go into mission planning and data management and tips and tricks for flying. On Wednesday, we're going to dive deeper into photogrammetry, image processing with a variety of different platforms, including Pix4D, OpenDroneMap, ArcGIS, and Drone Deploy. On Thursday, we're going to continue going into applications, and so we'll hear some talks about how people have been using drone data for agriculture, ecosystem monitoring. We're going to have a number of breakout groups so we can talk in smaller groups about the different uses of drones, and then we'll go over LiDAR. On Friday, we're going to have some more presentations on applications. So for example, how drones are being used for marine monitoring, intertidal research. We'll also have some more talks about safety, we'll go into SenseFly presentation. And then that afternoon, we'll have additional time for folks to fly who want to stick around for that day. And so again, the goal here is to really help introduce you all to the various sensors and platforms, the different softwares for imagery processing, and also just help answer any questions that you all have around the use and application of drones. And so for the rest of today, after this talk, we're going to go into the application of drones and just give an overview. We'll take a short break. We'll come back at 11 to do an overview of the different hardware platforms. We'll have lunch at noon, and then again, tech support's going to be from 1 to 2. Then this afternoon, we're going to dive into drone safety and regulations, because there's one thing that we need to start with. It's how to keep each other safe. We'll take a brief break at 2:50, and then at 3 o'clock, we'll go into the field planning and equipment presentation. We'll take another short break at 3:50, and then from 4 to 4:50, we'll go over mission planning and then have some closing remarks. And then this evening from 6 to 8, we're going to meet over at the MBEST facility. It's about a mile or so away, or actually, no, it's a little bit more than a mile. But we'll have some poster presentations. There'll be some snacks and some drinks, and really have this as an opportunity for folks to network with one another and get to know each other. The address is down there. It's 3180 Imgen Road, number 104. And it's about a 10-minute drive, but it's probably like an hour walk. So you'll most likely want to carpool or drive over there this evening. And with that, I'll go ahead and end it, see if there's any questions before we move on to the next presentation. With that, I will go ahead and turn it back over to Sean.
First, I was just notified that the website has appeared to be up and down, the DroneCamp website. The trick is that it has to be the HTTPS, correct, Shane? Not the HTTP. I don't know, somehow or other, the beginning of the URL It's maybe it went out without the S on the end of it. So I just wanted to let you all know about that. All right, so while Andy's getting that set up, I want to just resonate and echo what Andy and Justin have already touched on a little bit. Key thing being that this is a large collaborative effort, not just on part of the instructors, but also on a collaborative effort among the participants here. This event has grown enormously in the last 6 years. In 2017 was the first year we did. And at that time, I developed most of the curriculum and coordinated most of the event. And it was much smaller. It was like in the 30, like 30 people attended it. And it was shorter. It was like a 3 or 4 day event. Over the years, it has grown with instructors, domain experts all over the place. Brandon Stark, that is the guru on all things regulation and safety. We have experts that have been in the field, like Becca, that have been flying for quite some time, that was actually in one of the earliest drone camps and then jumped into it. As far as participants go, we have one of the co-instructors this week, used to be my vice provost at the university, and he decided to step down from his position and do drone research because he liked it so much more than what he was doing with filing like bureaucratic paperwork all the time. And so this is a really fun topic. One of the key ways that I like to approach this is to try to convey or tell everybody about all the different things I wish I knew when I first started. Because if we save you crashing one drone or going out on one field campaign and coming back with terrible or worthless data, and it's a significant project, that alone can pay for this whole entire event monetarily, but also in stress and in other ways. So that's one of the goals, at least for me, when we put things together. And because with that goal or objective, I try to frame the way the things we touch on in kind of the order or priority that I get questions from everybody. And one of those is equipment. It's like, what kind of equipment do we want to get? And that's the number one kind of cold call or Zoom session or whatever that I cover. So that's day one. We're going to talk a lot about equipment. But as soon as you start getting into that, you go, well, wait a minute, what are the regulations and so forth that I have to cover to take care of that? So then we have Dr. Brandon Stark, to cover a little bit of that, which we'll touch on a little bit later and tomorrow as well. But again, those are just a couple different examples of how this has evolved. Now we even have the former mayor of Santa Cruz giving the introduction here, which is awesome. If you didn't know that, Justin, the city council member, was the mayor of Santa Cruz a couple of years ago. Let's see here. There we go. Okay. I can't see it here, but I can see it there. So again, figuring out a couple of the technical details are always going to be, there's going to be bumps along the way. And I should preface what I'm going to talk about here. I have a different presentation that maybe I'll show tonight at the social. Is like all the things that can go wrong, but I don't want to scare you with like, oh yeah, look at all the different ways you can crash your drone or all the different things. So, but I have one of those slides for each one of the projects that I'll talk about here shortly. But I dove into drone applications in 2016 pretty heavily because my background is in remote sensing is a core specialty with all things ag and natural resource related, also combined with that and GIS. But with that background, drones were just a natural fit for me. And since then, been flying missions all over the state. Here's just a basic map of where some of these projects have occurred. Everything from right north of Mexicali up to the northern tip of the state in all kinds of different environments, 48 projects, tens of thousands of acres probably at this point with using different platforms. But it's not just about flying in say rangelands and grasslands and wetlands and over forest. A lot of it's about how to collect the data in a way that you can analyze it and create something that's actionable or useful in some way. So we're our program, my program personally, along with Andy Lyons and Shane Fire in the back, we're from the UCANR, Agriculture and Natural Resource Division, which is the home for cooperative extension. And our core philosophy there is practical, actionable type research and cooperative extension education. So it's kind of this fits well with us, especially since the scale at which you collect data with drones is appropriate for a lot of research. So you're not going to cover tens of thousands of acres at once with a drone. That just doesn't make sense unless you have like a military drone, which different kind of scenario. But with the small UAS or unmanned aerial systems, then you cover plot size research scale very well. So what I did a couple of drone camps ago is I looked at, very in high detail, I went down, where am I spending my time when I go out on these campaigns? Say there was 48 campaigns. Well, I just used a small subset of 3 campaigns to figure out where time is allotted. Because everyone thinks about the flights as being the most important thing, but that turned out to be only about 7% of my time was spent on that. You can see there's time spent on just driving to and from the sites, especially if you're going all the way down to the southern tip of the state. And so just drive time, the GIS mapping and analysis, that's huge. I mean, if you're for kind of non-recreational purposes, you need to be getting something for your effort, and that's the GIS mapping analysis. In a lot of cases, unless you're doing cinematography. So that's a lot of the time. The data delivery and documentation, something people don't consider sometimes, and that's they're going to talk when I say they, Shane Fire and Andy are going to talk about that a bit tomorrow. So GCP placement and recording GCPs with say a Trimble GPS, that takes quite a bit of time, almost as much time as you spend flying. The loading, unloading, prepping gear, mission planning and coordination, which we'll talk about later in the afternoon, that is something that's easily underappreciated. And when I think about just how much, like for this event, for example, I spent all day charging batteries and prepping gear on Saturday, just from morning till night. It was just, there's so much time getting everything ready. It's similar when you go out on a campaign. You don't want to get out there and go, oh man, I don't have a dongle that I need to get my my drone to communicate with the controller or the controller to the tablet. So there's a lot that goes into it. We'll go over that throughout this week. This is a little bit of a Candyland effect here. We're going to start off here, like talking about defining goals. I sometimes say there's like a chain of knowledge that you need to have to be really effective at drone data collection, analysis, you name it. A lot of that starts with having some information or knowledge about what kind of environment or what kind of data you need to collect. So what is the issue that you're looking at? Is it crop water stress? Is it fire damage? Succession following a fire? You have to have a little bit of knowledge about that, but then you have to have knowledge about the actual equipment. You have to know about the regulations. You have to know about the data management, which is one of the biggest areas I wish I knew more about when I first started, like, because there's nuances to drone data, which is big data. It really gets big fast. There's the processing, which makes that big data even bigger. And then delivery and the analysis there at the end. That's and sharing. And so this is a lot of what we'll be covering throughout this week. And by the way, these slides will be available to you later. We'll post those for both everybody here and virtually. You'll have access to all of this, and the recordings, which will come maybe in a day or two, because it takes time to clean those up a little bit. So just to talk about a few missions. Natural resources, that's one of the areas. How many people in here are interested in natural resources mostly? Good. How about agriculture? well, about half and half. Some of you were overlap, you do both. So there's I'll start off talking about natural resources a little bit, just to kind of like inspiring sort of project ideas. But one thing to note is most of the time, the process of going out and collecting the data and the management, sometimes the regulations, that if you know how to do it for natural resources, the same principles apply to agricultural data collection and processing analysis. So first off, one of the powers of drone data collection is this concept or the science really of photogrammetry. So when you collect drone imagery, typically for research purposes, not again, leaving cinematography out of this equation, you're taking a series of photos. And nowadays you have software that can recognize key point between those photos and leverage the panoramic distortion, think fisheye, between those photos to then create three-dimensional modeling of surfaces, or at least 2.5-dimensional modeling of surfaces from the overhead angle. And that's really powerful for a lot of natural resource applications. Think like in this case, I'm looking at washes throughout the Mojave Desert that also coincide with endangered tortoise migratory areas, but it can be used for erosion would be an example, falling or post-fire. So the capacity to get three-dimensional modeling out of drone imagery, even with a simple RGB, is really powerful. Our first big project, was in the Mojave Desert, and that's why I started to kick this off here in 2016. Andy and I flew over 3,500 acres for the endangered tortoise project that I was talking about, looking at telemetry data and comparing it to the wash lines in the desert. As it turns out, desert tortoises are extremely habitual. And so if you put a fence or a barrier across the path they're used to using, they'll run into that fence and then just until they die. They will just, it's a major problem. And so we did this project to help inform some of the local land managers to where not to create barriers, where to have, say, road obstructions, that sort of thing. Similarly, also in the Mojave, did another project looking at habitat, classifying vole habitat is also a little bit endangered in that region. Same kind of principle. The thing with that, with collecting that elevational data, if you have some knowledge in GIS, you can apply a model. You can get stream flow models that are very accurate, way beyond something you could do in the past. It is such a fine scale. In these environments, you might have just little crevices that might be appropriate for hiding places or whatever for vole, for example, that you could not get with airborne LiDAR or satellite digital elevation models. It doesn't work as well. It's not fine enough resolution. That's where the power of drone data collection comes in, is that fine scale detail, both RGB, sometimes different spectral bands like near infrared, sometimes thermal, but when you need the data on the dates that you need it. So when there's no clouds, maybe when the habitat is just in like the successional period or the phenologic period where you want to capture the data to inform whatever interests you have to start with. Similarly, we've collected, as I mentioned, and I know that not everybody like me is a spectroscopy nerd that loves all things like in the near infrared bands and the thermal bands and how that stuff works. But you sometimes use something called a normalized difference vegetation index, which is a comparison of the near infrared that reflects far greater than the visible range we're used to, the red, green, blue. And when you compare the near infrared with the red, and in terms of reflectance, the near infrared is much higher, you can get an equation that turns into a normalized difference vegetation index, is a measure of the relative vigor or health of plants in an environment. That's really, really informative for regrowth, in this case, post-fire at the Hopland Research and Extension Center up in Mendocino County, where the river fire happened to burn through. And looking in this case where, say, hydrological lines coincide with different types of vegetation that grows back in its health. You can use simple stuff like, simple imagery like RGB imagery, even from a GoPro, to be able to identify dead trees. In this case was a patch of bark beetle kill trees that, and then you can subtract dead surface debris by using your elevation models to get actual just in-tree dead vegetation. So you can do a lot with fairly, I wouldn't say simple, they're all complex machines at this point, but just off the shelf, what one might say is like kind of simple Phantom 3 or just an RGB drone, you can get some pretty powerful data that you couldn't have got 10 years ago. It's just amazing. Post-fire in Lassen County, looking at classification of dead and down trees all over the place. So you can look at that, different types of veg cover. So sometimes when you're out in the field, there's the kind of the convention of you running transects and collecting, okay, this is what kind of plant types we have along this transect. Well, you fly a drone at a low elevation, you can have extremely defensible quantitative data of what is right on that line, rather than going out with field notes and saying, I have this plant at this foot marker and this next foot is this other plant. You can actually get really detailed information just from a low flying drone in some cases. Agriculture. I'll kick it off with our Lynn Cove Research and Extension Center. And when I say our Lynn Cove Research and Extension Center, there's the UC has the University of California is partially a land grant university system, where originally it was Berkeley, Davis, and Riverside were some of the land grant universities that then had research centers around the state. That kind of got consolidated into UCANR as to lead these research centers. And because we are naturally bridged between the campuses, we have 9 of these around the state. There's both for natural resources and agriculture. In this case, our Lynn Cove Research Center is south, a little bit east of Fresno. And at this center, it's primarily agriculture with a lot of orchard applications at that site. One of the projects that we collaborated on was looking at the point cloud, which we'll talk about during our photogrammetry sessions, to be able to define structural characteristics of plants. And with that information, in a kind of a similar study, then you can go into looking at zonal statistics of the characteristics of those individual plants in a way that you can have everything from the mean, the max, the standard deviation, you name it, for NDVI that I just mentioned before, for the plant vigor, as well as the actual leaf area of those plants. That's important if you happen to have different fertigation treatments, you have different soil types. We're working on a study right now looking at genotypes of trees. So if you plant one genotype, then you're going to predictably have a much larger yield. And for a small effort, you could get far better result for yield. We've done similar studies at our Kearney Research and Extension Center, also near Lynn Cove, southeast of Fresno, looking at thermal characteristics in terms of their irrigation and treatment types, if it was burned in the past or ground up for litter on the ground. We didn't find a lot here, but we did come out of this study with an interesting realization that the time of day that you fly your thermal data matters a lot. So because plants, they stop their photosynthesis at certain points. And so their thermal characteristics relative to their reflectance of the near infrared and red for NDVI at least, the relative difference changes throughout the day. And so you got to catch it at the right point for it to actually give you good data. Back to just using a simple RGB camera, you can do indexes, and indexes are just, again, it's just an equation. In this case, looking at green compared to the red divided by the green plus the red in this case, to get an index of what areas of, in this case, a desert research center, looking at adaptive research in kind of drought tolerant type plantings. And I brought this to the research center's director, and he was so excited. He's like, oh, wait, I can see effects here that I can't see in just the regular RGB imagery, because it kind of highlighted where they had like a messed up water main and they're wasting water that's going to compromise the integrity of their whole research plan. So they, just came from a simple RGB camera way back. I don't know if the date is on here. This was probably late 2016 or when this was collected. So years ago, when we just had our smallest drones before we got all the neat fancy equipment that we have out here now. Okay, so question on this one was, where's the nearest town? Holtville. It's just directly north of the Mexicali border. So you can just, the hotel that we stay at there, you can see the border lights along there. So it's all the way in the very southern part of the state. And with that, I want to make sure that we always have time for questions. These sessions, I don't want you to get PowerPoint saturation. And this goes for not just my presentation, but we'll have all kinds of other presentations. I like to try to engage for questions, comments, maybe personal experience. Does anybody have any questions right now? Yes, sir. Okay, yes. So the question, and I'll repeat this because of the people that are on virtual, so the question was, can you use filtered cameras to get the near infrared that then you can use for getting indices like normalized difference vegetation index? The answer to that is yes, but I very strongly urge you to go with purpose-built cameras to start with, engineered to be a near infrared or red edged camera rather than going with the filtered cameras. I've used Map IR's cameras before, and I don't want to, they're very pleasant in like all my dealings with them, but the quality of the data that came from them was far, far lacking compared to, say, a Red Edge or a Sequoia or one of those cameras. It's just and the issue being unless you have a filter that's just right, then the near infrared, because it reflects so much more than the visible spectrum at the camera, there's so many near infrared photons going in when the filters have been stripped or changed that it saturates. So it's like blinding. And so you don't get enough contrast in a lot of those filtered cameras. So anyways, other question over here. Yes, sir. Okay, that's a good question. So the question is, can you do subsurface or subsurface being the canopy top investigations using something like a spectral camera as opposed to a LiDAR unit? The answer is sometimes, but the key element is that to get underneath the canopy, you need to have look angles from where the drone is at. Sometimes you can get around that by setting your camera up to point off nadir. So nadir is straight down. You can have your camera point off nadir so you can get under the canopy to a certain degree. But LiDAR, the value of that is it's instantaneous. And if one of the lasers that gets through the canopy can get back to the drone, then you actually have a definitive point on the ground. Wherein with the photogrammetry, you're flying, and we'll go over this in the photogrammetry sessions, you're collecting like in a lawnmower pattern with sufficient overlap on the forward overlap as well as the side overlap. Those pictures have to get underneath the canopy to get down to ground level to get the investigation of the ground level. You can kind of play with that with creating what's called a digital terrain model, where you can use, usually it's the steepness and the contour of features to erase above what is being detected as a smooth surface of the ground. But that's an artificial process. It's not the actual like seeing what's below the canopy. Does that answer the question? Good. Other questions? Yes. Yes, exactly. So the question was, when I said 2.5 dimensional versus 3 dimensional, what's the difference is the implied part of that question. I say 2.5 dimensional because typically when you're collecting drone imagery, you're collecting it from one plane or at least above the target, and you're not getting back up underneath it to get an actual like a full circumference of, say, an object. You don't get quite that level of 3 dimension. So, but it's more than 2 dimension, just pure flat. It's like a DEM, a digital elevation model. And when you create these point clouds, which are the key points that identified in the software, maybe sometimes millions of key points, those floating points have elevation, but they also can be imbued with the spectral characteristics of the data that you've collected, whether it's RGB or the near infrared or thermal. But you have those floating points with imbued values in them. So that's, yes. That. Yes, that is a perfect, difference there. Good. Yes, sir. Okay, that's a good question. That's a complex question. So I'll try to simplify it for time. We'll return to that during the data processing steps. So I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, the core part of that is that do you have to ground truth your data that's collected in, say, NDVI that's capitalizing on reflectance of your visible and your near infrared bands? The way that is handled is that you use a white panel that has a known reflectance, that then you compare the downwelling of sun to what's received at the sensor. And when you divide what's received at the sensor by some value or like calibrated white value below it, then you can get what's called reflectance. But that gets complicated. So yeah, I don't want to get into like too far in the weeds. Light angle differs based upon what's the relative position of the sun to the drone where it's collected. The processing software uses color balancing internally to get a spectral median or a spectral value that's close. Shane, did you? Yes. Oh, yes. Okay. Okay, great. So yes, that's 2 good points. So the question, I'll start with the question. The question was about was do you need to calibrate, and how do you certify or assure your quality of your data for something like NDVI, where do you have to go in the field to collect that? And the answer is that's a complex question, and we'll have to cover it later. The other thing that was just, I think Justin touched on it, but I want to revisit it. If you are virtual and you're seeing me talk and you have a question, go on the chat and put it in your chat. And for every one of our sessions, we'll have a virtual moderator that then can either answer those questions directly if they know, or they'll convey it to whoever's presenting to give the answers to those questions. With that, we're close to the time, or we are at the time right now, and we want to make sure we have a break to set up equipment. So let's take a 8-minute break while we get our gear all set up. we're going to have lots of Q&A time. In fact, Friday, we always run out of Q&A time. That's one of the reasons why we put it at the end of this. So everyone keep your thoughts, maybe even scribble down notes. If it doesn't get answered this week, we'll come back to it and back to it again. And that'll be great. Thank you. And next is going to be fun, equipment.